Hello and welcome to another edition of Short and Sharp, where we try and give you sharp information in a short format. Now, this particular session, we're going to be focusing on the logbook under the new regime of the Property and Stock Agents Act 2002. As you probably know, there is a regime or a requirement that each time you progress from a certain level to a higher level, that you evidence the experience component by way of a logbook. So I've got on the screen here the exact wording that you would be using if you want to download a copy of the logbook, which is what I've got in my hand here. It's a 5-page document. You can download it for free, obviously, and you just need to type in the words evidence of experience, evidence of work experience logbook, and for good measure put the Property and Stock Agents Act 2002. It will bring you straight to a particular page that you can download this 5-page document. So, and it's relevant to people who are moving from assistant agent to class 2 and from class 2 to class 1. Each of those progressions requires a qualification, time and experience. And the experience is evidenced by the logbook. So although there are obviously instructions on the logbook, which are easy to follow, I just thought I'd walk through it with you now and just give you some additional information. So the logbook is broken up into part 1 and part 2, and it's a 9-5 all 8 rule. What do I mean by that? Well, it's 9-5 for class 2, and it's all and 8 for class 1. So what do I mean by that? Well, you'll see when you read the instructions that if you're moving from assistant agent to class 2, you must be able to show evidence of completing 9 of the tasks in part 1 of this logbook and 5 of the tasks in part 2. And if you're moving from a class 2 license to a class 1 license, you must be able to evidence all of the tasks in part 1 and 8 of the tasks in part number 2. So you might be thinking, well, what is this part 1, part 2 stuff? So if you have a look at the logbook, you will see that the very first page, when you turn over the cover page, it actually says part 1, and it's got a space there for your name, and it's got in the order of 15 tasks. So part 1 has an available number of 15 tasks. Now remember, if you are moving from assistant agent to class 2, you've got to do 9 of those, 9 of the 15. And you'll notice that they are actually quite high-level topics, what I would call higher-level topics, like apply ethical practice in property, develop and prepare a prospecting plan, for example. I'm just reading a couple here. Demonstrate effective management of client relationships. So I would classify those as high level. And part 2 is where the detail comes in. So remember, class 2 elevation, 9 from part 1, 5 from part 2. And you'll see that part 2 of the logbook is broken up into 3 sections. There's a section on sales, which has about 7 tasks. There's a section on leasing, which has 11 tasks, and then there's a section on property and strata management, which has 12 tasks. So you can imagine, therefore, that if we look at part 1, it's fairly straightforward. Look at part number 2. Again, part number 2 has got space for your name, and then it's got a series of tasks that relate to sales, a series of tasks that relate to leasing, and then a series of tasks that relate to strata or property management. And so you can see how your specialty would become relevant there. So all the tasks must be able to be signed off in part 1 when you move to class 1, and 8 from class 2, and 9 part 1, and 5 from part 2 when you move from assistant agent to class 2. Now, probably the most important thing to remember when you're filling out this logbook, it is your responsibility. You are the candidate, so you download it and you get your boss to fill it in. Now, they are very clear in this logbook, and they're very clear in the regulations and the Act as to who can sign this logbook. And it says here on the instructions, completion of the tasks must be verified by the licensee in charge responsible for supervising the applicant. So it does mean that the licensee in charge would have to be a Class 1 license holder. They would have to be supervising you. And there is obviously an implication that you are somehow engaged or employed by that person. And you'll notice when you flick through the pages that what's required of that licensee in charge Class 1 is that they put their license number there and that they actually sign it. And so that person, that Class 1 licensee in charge, is responsible for the veracity of the sign-off. And so the OFT will definitely be looking to compare your logbook with the experience and other components of an application. They'll be looking to see whether or not it stacks up. And they have made it very clear that if they feel as though it's warranted, that they will be asking further questions. So there's an amount of rigor brought into this whole process that you should be aware of. So I'm hoping that was a useful few minutes of your time, and we look forward to bringing you more short and sharp information in due course. Until then, make sure you look after yourself.